What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. So, my search disk woes continue. Scoring problems usually take a bit of time to troubleshoot. And in this case, there were a few different problems that I found and corrected today that I hadn't noticed last night. The first of which, those tension arms that I had mentioned that can cause a problem if they're not the appropriate tension, were not the appropriate tension, at least one of them. It had been adjusted at some point in its life and bent out of shape, and so it wasn't, even though it was deflected against the cylinder that it's attached to, it wasn't making good contact in all instances. So I fixed that, and that brought me back cards 4 and 6 scoring, which I was pretty happy about. And then I noticed that I was getting some arcing on some of the number relays, so 1 through 5. So I took another look, and to take a look at those, they're all wired in series, or in parallel rather, the coils on the power side. So because they're all connected, you can't separate them without desoldering them. Well, I don't like to do that unless I have to, because again, I'm lazy and I'd rather make a lot more work for myself. So thankfully Bally thought of lazy folks like myself, and what they did is put them on a panel that's removable, and you can flip it down and then look at the switches and adjust as necessary. Now, each of the switches on Search 1 through 5 are of the type that have a second bent piece of metal backing up the short edge of the switch. This short piece of metal provides deflection and allows the switch to bounce. As I mentioned last night, timing is absolutely critical on these switches, and if they don't close at the appropriate time, then you'll never get a hold for your scores. Now, here's an infuriating thing. On ticker tape, as I mentioned, this is the only game that I have and that I've ever worked on, and I've worked on quite a few bingos that weren't my own, that has multiple cards. And so because it has multiple cards, it has 2 different search units, and therefore all the problems that occur in one search unit can occur in the second. Now, the search unit that scores on cards 1 through 3 was working 100% correctly. And so it was driving me a bit insane. So I took the search unit apart again this afternoon and took a look and toned everything out one more time just to make sure, because a partially broken wire will cause all kinds of weird phantom behavior, and I've had that before and had to fix that on Bounty. Now, here on ticker tape, I wiggled all the wires around. The only thing I haven't done, the small wires which go from the wiper arms up to the slip rings are connected via a small solder point on the bottom of the search wiper assembly, and everything toned out there. But typically these were electrical taped into place around the shaft and then zip tied, and this prevented the wires from flexing too much. Now, I've certainly had the problem before where a wire was broken inside of the cladding underneath that zip tie, just because they move around all the time and they flex. And so what's going to happen? It's going to shear at some point. There's just not enough strength in that thin wire to actually hold it together. So that doesn't happen on every game. And it's a rarity, but it does happen. And if you're having scoring problems, it's worth investigating, toning everything out and cutting the whole thing apart and just making sure that if you wiggle the wire this way and that, you still have conductivity. Now, part of my laziness and cheapness is that I refuse to buy a new meter. And the positive probe on my meter is a piece of junk. And I have spare leads, but it appears to be inside of the meter. And I just haven't taken it apart yet to see what's going on. But it doesn't provide good conductivity depending on where on the probe you touch. And I've mentioned this before on many episodes because it always bites me in the back when I least expect it. So in this case, though, I'm able to tone the thing out and get, a good beep. But I can't trust it because of my stupid meter and my own stupid personality. It could very well be fooling me. So, one of these days, I promise I'll get a new meter. But until that time, I have to go on my gut. And so, I adjusted all of those individual search number relays, 1 through 5, and cleaned them. And in search relay number 3's case, there had been severe pitting. And I had filed it previously, but it was still arcing. So I cleaned it, and it still acted as if it was fouled. So I ended up flipping that switch over so that the large contact surface hit the large contact surface. Now, the only problem with doing this is that carbon will build up on it, and I will have to clean it again in the future. But I'd rather it work accurately 90% of the time than not at all. So, my current status is that it will search and find everything in card 1 through 3 just fine. On card 4 through 6, it's barely making contact with the wiper fingers when it actually does decide that I have a winner. And then I have to make sure that it's making good contact before I try to push the regular score button or the double score button. So I decided to take a step back because that was driving me crazy. Trying to adjust those little fingers so that they're all perfectly centered on the rivets as they pass is maddening sometimes. I highly suggest leaving those alone unless you feel like pulling some hair out, unless they're obviously misadjusted. But I never learned my own lessons, so so I started troubleshooting the scoring. Now, I had mentioned previously that there was a feature that had been blacked out on the score and instruction cards that I thought the operator had cut out of the machine. Well, when I went to look up the score and instruction cards, I realized, and in the schematic, actually I hadn't looked at the score and instruction cards until tonight, but I'm getting there. So, on the schematic, that unit and the associated feature that it provided didn't appear. So I realized that feature wasn't present in the game and that the operator had substituted just a generic 6-card score and instruction card set. So, keeping that in mind, I'm troubleshooting scoring. So on card number 1, if you get 3 in a row, you earn 4 replays. If you get 4 in a row, the score and instruction cards in the game said you earned 16 replays. Well, I was consistently getting 20. I said, that's not right. So I moved on and double-checked all the scoring on cards number 2 and 3, and those came up appropriately. And card number 4 came up appropriately as well. And I said, that's kind of weird. Card number 6 is where I ended up breaking 4, 5, and 6, and I think I'm going to leave it for tonight and take another look tomorrow. But card number 1, with it scoring 16 instead of 20, I went back and looked and checked and made sure that the unit that handles counting the replays was actually counting appropriately, and it was. If you get half steps or weird things of that nature, it will cause it to miscount. But it had been adjusted previously, and I went through all the units when I bought the machine and made sure that they stepped up and back crisply, and they all do. So, now I'm left with the situation where it's a mystery as to why it's happening. So, I start looking at the schematic, and something's not adding up, so I decide to take a look at the score and instruction cards that are on Phil's site at bingo.cdyn.com. Well, what do you know? Ticker tape, you earn 20 replays if you get 4 in a line on the first card. The good news is, at least, I've fixed 2 other games that had minor issues, so I don't feel all that bad, but that can be irritating. So double check your score and instruction cards, make sure that they're appropriate for your bingo game, and if you don't have to adjust the search wiper arms, don't do it. Check conductivity. Make sure that you wiggle the wire around, because as the wire flexes and moves, it's going to change the conductivity, possibly, if you've got a cold solder joint or you've got broken wire inside the cladding. So that's all the tips for tonight. And hopefully I'll have the search disk thing beaten by tomorrow. Card number 5, I can't get it to stop consistently on or at all. It's not pulling in the search index coil at all for card number 5. So I'm hoping when I adjust the wiper fingers completely correctly, it will suddenly burst into life. I don't think that that's going to be the case, but a man can dream. So, thank you again for listening to my rant here tonight. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, and you can listen to us at foramusementonly.libsyn.com. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, and on our website. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.